episode number 139 of the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. I'm Michelle, a fertility acupuncturist here to provide you with resources on how to create a wholesome approach to your fertility journey. My guest today is Allison Schaaf. Allison is the founder of Miscarriage Hope Desk, created as a resource she wanted during her years-long struggle with infertility, including a total of 5 miscarriages. Miscarriage Hope Desk provides evidence-based research articles, stories of hope and community for those struggling with recurrent loss. Allison has a background as a chef and dietitian and is also a serial entrepreneur. She founded the meal planning website Prep Dish, which helps busy moms get healthy, delicious meals on the table. So welcome to the podcast, Allison.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So I'd love for you to share your story. I know it's a very, very long journey that you've been on, and you've had so many ups and downs, and I'd love for you to share your story.
Yeah, so I'll get into it. I'll kind of give an abbreviated version, and then we can dive into any of the areas where you have questions. But basically, I married my husband, gosh, it's been like 6 years ago. We knew when we got married that we wanted to have kids. And when it came time to start trying, I didn't have any reason to think we would have any trouble with that. I think at the time, I thought our biggest struggle would be how many kids we want to have, because we kind of went back and forth on the number, and we thought, that was kind of our little, play argument, but as we got into it, we realized we had a lot bigger issues at hand. I got pregnant within a few months, but pretty quickly miscarried. Actually, that first one was strange because I didn't even realize I was pregnant, because I did have, some sort of like period, and then had a miscarriage 2 weeks later. So that one was very kind of strange and shocking, because it involved like going to urgent care, and trying to figure out what had happened and being told I was pregnant, even though I had no idea I was pregnant. I mean, we were trying, but because of that period, I hadn't tested that month. So that was, but after that first one, I was like, well, this is common. I'll just keep trying. Like, this was, probably just one of those 1 in 4, right? I started researching it. And so we continued on and kept trying. And a few months later was pregnant again. But about 7 weeks in, miscarried with that one. And at that point I was like, oh, wow, like something might be going on here, right? Like, why am I 2, like that's not what the stats said, right? Like they said, okay, 1 in 4, but usually you go on to have a healthy pregnancy, if you have had a miscarriage. I was like, okay, if there's 2, like something seems like it could be going on. So I went to my doctor. She said, actually, it was kind of awful, because she was like, well, because of your age, I'll go ahead and let you do testing. But a lot of times we don't test until you've had 3, which to me was just,
my
wow. Okay. So, but luckily I did go and have some testing done. It did come back that I had a blood clotting issue, antiphospholipid syndrome. So to me, in some ways, like getting that diagnosis, like, it felt like, oh, well, here's something. I know a lot of people don't get any answers when they start searching for like what might be going on. So in some ways I felt grateful that like, okay, here I know something that might be going on. There's a specific protocol, you go on blood thinners, and that should help. So we started kind of gearing up, and we took a little bit of a break to do that testing and just to kind of see where everything was at before we jumped into it. But we did, try a third time, and were really helpful with that third time. And it really did it looked great, right? Like I got pregnant. I was really sick. I started throwing up. And of course, what does everyone say when you're sick? They say, well, that's a sign of a healthy pregnancy. So honestly, as miserable as I was really encouraged, because I was like, well, this is great. And we saw the heartbeat multiple times, maybe not several, but multiple times. And I think at like 11 weeks, we went in for the ultrasound. And I remember in the car with my husband, telling him like how positive I was about the appointment. I said, yeah, sure. Like I'm nervous, but like, I think I even gave him like a weird percentage of like, I'm 99% confident that everything's fine because, you know, I threw up last night, like surely I'm pregnant and everything's fine because, you know, I have this like horrible morning sickness. So like, I am actually strangely confident about this appointment. And then we got in there, and the nurse started by trying to do, just like a Doppler, and couldn't get a heartbeat, but she's like, you know, it could be, you know, position or something like that. And you're still pretty early. So we went in for the ultrasound, and like, I can still picture that day.
Oh, that's horrible.
Of like, you know, just the silence, right? Like the nurse brings up the ultrasound, like no one says anything. And it's just like, my heart like dropped. And, and it was like, you know, she brought in the doctor, and of course my doctor wasn't there that day. And, you know, I think it was at that point that I was like, oh my gosh, like this, how much of this can I continue to take? And actually it was at that point where I, you know, kind of got through that, but like the interesting timing on that is we had a trip already planned, and this was very much pre-COVID, but we had a trip planned out of the country, went ahead, and I was going to have to cancel it because I was so sick, but we ended up being able to keep the flight and took that trip kind of the next week. And in some ways that trip was really good for me to kind of have that space to grieve, kind of like just get away from it all. And I did have, you know, I kind of call it my breakdown, where I just lost it, like in the middle of a cobblestone street in a small town in France. And I'm just like on the ground sobbing. And, you know, my husband's like, did not know what to do. We went to lunch. He eats lunch and I just cry. So it was this weird, like, but you know, no one there knew us, but it was actually in that moment, like in that car ride after I broke down, that I told my husband, I was like, I really think I want to adopt. And I think we talked, I don't know, hadn't been a serious conversation up until this point, but like there was something in me. It wasn't just like, oh, this is hard, let me shift to something else and it'll make it better. It was like, no, like I really think that's my next step. And, you know, that was the start of it, but it was kind of a few months of a conversation, and we continued to have that conversation. And I kept like, so I'm a meditator, and anytime I would get quiet, anytime I would meditate, all I could hear was adoption. And anytime I got in my car, because, you know, you're quiet, it's almost like a meditation, right? Like I live in the country and have a lot of long drives into town. And it was just like, I couldn't shake it. I just like, there was a part of me that just kind of knew this, and then had to, you know, give my husband.
I just got the chills. Yeah.
And, you know, then got my husband on board for this. And I was just like, I think this is what I feel and know. And as we made that decision, I actually did get pregnant a fourth time, and was really excited about it and did all the steps and rushed to do everything, and, you know, miscarried yet again, which I think in some ways was just reinforcement of like, look, like I can't keep doing this. And I think, you know, at this point he was like starting to like see and understand. So we went through the adoption process, and I always say, for anyone that's looking to go through adoption, you're welcome to listen to my story. But I know, you know, just like fertility, everyone has their own, you know, story and journey. And our, from what I understand, our adoption journey is very atypical, and that, you know, the process of getting, going through our home study and all of that went pretty quickly. I was motivated, right? I was like, anything to shift myself away from focusing on my body and my fertility and all that. I was like, I needed a break from that. So the paperwork for that was kind of a nice, something else for me to focus on that wasn't me and my body. But we went through that process very quickly. We had, so this is kind of the fall. And then in December, we had to wait until January to get in with the agency that we wanted to use. But the local agency that we did our home study with, they said, you know, look, you're already approved. So if you want, you can get on our list. You have to pay a small fee. And I said, well, we might as well just get on your list. even though we were going to go with a different agency in a few weeks. We got on their list and didn't hear anything for a few weeks. It's Christmas time. I did sort of do this weird thing at Christmas time where I kept, like, my mom was there to visit, and I told her, I was like, it could happen anytime. Like, maybe you should stay longer, even though like there was that's very illogical. Right. And I had also told my husband, like, I just think it's going to happen really fast. And right now it seems like it's going to take forever. And, it might not be another year, but I think if we knew the date, we would realize just how close it is. And, I think a part of me knew, like, that it was really close. And I said, I think it's going to be really fast. I said, sometimes people get a call and then it's like a few days late, there's already someone in labor. And then a few days later they have their baby. And I said, I think it's going to be like that. And so again, my mom was there for Christmas. She left. I made some weird thing of like, are you sure you don't want to stay? Even though we hadn't had a call. And a lot of times it's still even months after you do get a call. Right. But my mom left, and like the next day, we get a phone call and there was a baby. He'd already been born, waiting for us at the hospital. And it was from the time of the call to the time of like having this baby in our arms, it was like 3 hours, which
oh wow.
Even the attorney was like, I've been doing this for 11 years and I've never seen like this quick of a turnaround. Because by the time we got there, the paperwork was already done. Like, it was just like super quick and fast. And, basically, and it was that Christmas baby that I'd said I thought we were going to get. I said, maybe we'll get a Christmas baby. And, the adoption agency that had done our home study was like, don't count on that. Like, that's not going to happen. But
that's amazing.
It did. And it was amazing. And it felt magical. Like the whole thing felt very magical. And we had, the baby of our dreams, and it was magic. And then, a few weeks, into like a week or two into having him, I got a positive pregnancy test again. And that miscarriage, it was pretty quick, but I do like to point it out because a lot of people will say, well, now that you've adopted, it'll just happen, right? Like now you're just going to magically get pregnant and it's going to be easy. And that wasn't the case for us. Like we adopted and I thought that, right? Because so many people say it like, oh, yeah, wow, like we're going to have this baby. And then in 9 months, we're going to have another baby. And we've waited so long and now we're going to have all these babies all at once. Well, that was not what happened. So, I miscarried again. And then I sat down with my husband. I said, look, like we have this new baby. I think we need to just like stop even trying for a few months so I can like enjoy my time with him. Both of us can enjoy our time with him. And then like also do some more testing. Like, let's figure out, like, we know I have this blood clotting issue, but we were taking the steps we needed for that. As soon as I got a positive pregnancy test, I was always starting on the blood thinners and doing all of that. So I'm like, let's figure out what's going on. We started meeting kind of like 5 or 6 months after the adoption. We started meeting with IVF clinics and trying to figure out, like, we tried to get pregnant, that didn't work. And we're like, well, maybe we should do IVF so we can, the thinking being like we could, test. And so that fall after adopting, so it was like 11 months in, when my son was 11 months old, we went through the process of IVF and went through, and we're positive about that. And I thought, if nothing else, it'll give us options, right? Like we can have these embryos and we'll have options. And went through that process and ended up with no viable embryos. And that was heart-wrenching. Like, I don't think the doctor expected, like, here we were getting pregnant all the time. So, like logically, like I was thinking we were going to get embryos. The doctor thought we were going to get embryos. And, I just thought that it was going to open the door for options, and it just didn't do that at all. So that was unexpectedly devastating. I think just because it didn't even consider that as like something that would happen, of like, look, I'm not even going to have anything to work with. And, that was a loss. And so for all the women out there who go through IVF or anything similar to that, like, there's all sorts of different kinds of loss you can have in the fertility world. So although that wasn't like a miscarriage, like that definitely was a huge loss for us. But then we were like, okay, let's regroup again. Let's like really, and throughout this whole time, right? Like I've been doing all the things, the supplements and diet changes and just, meditating and acupuncture and, trying so many different things, but try not to stress about it. Right. Try not to stress about it. But we did then we're like, okay, let's just really focus in and spend 3 months of just everything for both me and my husband. Let's just do everything, no caffeine, no, nothing, not even just moderation, and give it a final shot. If we're going to do this, let's really go all in a way that we hadn't before. And so we were getting ready to do that. But at the same time, we continued to try, throughout the process, we've always kind of continued to try, even if just casually. And we, a month or two after that failed round of IVF, got pregnant, and that one, it stuck.
Wow, so amazing.
Yeah. And so that one stuck. I did get the horrible morning sickness again. Mm-hmm. So that was something else to deal with. And other complications that happened throughout that pregnancy, where it was kind of, and it was also during COVID. I got pregnant a month or two before COVID. So, in the end, it was a healthy pregnancy. So so grateful for it. It definitely wasn't just there wasn't much easy about it. Right. But yeah, and that was kind of this past year. So that was my second son, who was born in September. So here I am today with, 2 little boys, and they are, the loves of my life. And it's been a journey to get here. Oh, and then, so the part I didn't mention is, right as I was going in for that round of IVF. So the whole time I've been going through this, fertility journey and the recurrent miscarriages, I felt like, okay, I'm going through infertility, but in a lot of ways, I was getting pregnant all the time. So I didn't always classify myself as going through infertility, mm-hmm. because I didn't feel like I quite fit into that world. And I felt like there wasn't a lot out there in terms of miscarriage, and realizing oh, you can have 5 miscarriage. I didn't even know that was possible. Mm-hmm. And so that was something, my husband and I were both entrepreneurs, and we always would talk we have got to create something to help women that are going through this, to let them know look, this is a thing, it can happen. It sucks. Here's community, here's stories of hope, here's resources, right. Let's create something. And so before I got pregnant with, my son, I was I'm going to go all in and start this thing. So I came up with Miscarriage Hope Desk, and it was so interesting because I basically launched that company right before the pregnancy. And so I built out the website and all of the pieces of Miscarriage Hope Desk, as I was pregnant, which of course wasn't my plan, but really felt kind of meant to be. And that, over the past year, I've really worked to build that out into a lot of resources for other women that are struggling with, miscarriage and especially recurrent loss. So that's been my new passion project, you could say. So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm sure. I mean, because it's so personal to you, and you really experience it. I mean, so many different times. Now, the thing that comes to my mind is how you managed, because with the last pregnancy, because a lot of times people think, okay, you get pregnant and then that's fine. And especially when you've gone through so much loss, it's almost like going through PTSD.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. No. And that's something within the community, and it's trying to figure out, even today or this week, it's I'm always trying to figure out how to balance that of we have people in our community that are going through loss actively, which is really a hard thing to get through. And you don't necessarily get through it, right? Mm-hmm. It's kind of always there. Yeah. But then also you do get pregnant, or, if that's your goal, a lot of times you're getting pregnant again. And how do you deal with that? And that is a very unique position to be in. And I had horrible morning sickness. So that wasn't fun. And then I'm also every time I go to the bathroom, I'm looking for blood, and it's just there's a lot, I had I went through therapy, and there was a lot of that, but ultrasounds, you heard the one story of that ultrasound, ultrasounds are really hard for me. So I've had to learn ways to cope. Like I want to go to an ultrasound to make sure that the baby's doing okay during pregnancy, but I had to learn how to do that so it wasn't so triggering for me. Like I would go and here's a tip for anyone that's dealing with that is like when I got into the ultrasound, the first thing I said to the ultrasound tech is like, look, ultrasounds are really hard for me. So if you can see like the heartbeat, if you could just kind of walk me through what you're seeing, because I'm going to be like, I'm on pins and needles right now. So if you can just kind of walk me, because they don't always, they just glance at your chart and sometimes they don't know. And they'll sit there and they'll kind of look around for 5 minutes and I'm sitting there panicking, like thinking that like, something's wrong. And it's like, they could just right away be like, oh, look, like there's the heart, you know, there's a few things they can say to kind of reassure you, but they don't know you need that reassurance all the time. Because in my experience, they glance at your charts. They don't necessarily realize like, oh, here's someone who's been through a lot of loss. Like this might be really hard for her, but they don't pick up on that. So but yeah, there's just so many things. And that's one example. So.
Yeah. And that's, that is like the thing. I mean, to see, because I have patients that I know very well and have seen them go through loss, and now they're pregnant and they're going through another type of fear. You know, you're so happy and you're so scared at the same time. And so sometimes they'll come up with like different coping skills and they'll try to do different things. But it's so, even with that, I don't think it really goes away. It's more like you just learn to live with it and deal with it.
Yeah, no, it's always there. And like, you know, there's times like I just told my story and I didn't kind of break down, but that's because I've told it several times. And I still sometimes will catch myself off guard as I'm retelling my story, and I will choke up and it will be difficult. There's still like dates that kind of will, you know, they come up, and it's, you know, that's just a natural part of it's a grieving process, and it's not linear. It's up and down. It's always there. It doesn't go away.
No, it doesn't. And I think that's like a really key point to bring up, because it's not something that just disappears or goes away. You just learn how to cope with it, really.
Yeah. You learn the best ways to deal with that, and to try and, you know, ways to try. So I did try with my pregnancy. This is something I encourage other women, is I did try and like actually enjoy the pregnancy, because really like that's a choice, is to allow yourself to enjoy it versus just like, hey, like I'm scared, so I'm going to like be taken over by the fear. And like, I think the reasoning in your mind is like, oh, if I allow myself to get excited, but then like, what if the worst thing happens? But, you know, I always say to that, like, look, if the worst thing happens, because I've had the worst thing happen, it sucks. It's going to suck whether or not you allowed yourself to get excited. So why don't you just
that's so true.
Yourself that joy and that excitement, and, you know, worry about the worst case scenario if that happens, because if the worst thing happens, it's going to be hard regardless of whether or not you allowed yourself to get excited. So, you know, try. And it's easier said than done, right? Like there were some days where it's like, right, Allison, like I'm not going to I'm not going to be excited today. But there were days where I did like allow myself to be excited. And as the pregnancy goes further along, for me, because my losses were all earlier, I started to become more comfortable in the fact like, oh, wow, like this might actually happen.
Yeah. And sometimes you feel that worry like has a purpose. You almost feel like worry keeps things safe. It's a weird kind of relationship we have with worry, but it almost feels like you have to worry, and that worrying is going to keep everything okay.
Exactly. And so that's why it's like you have to like consciously, like I had to consciously be like reminding myself, and like going, like I had a therapist that I worked with throughout this pregnancy, and she helped me through a lot of that, of like, okay, like we had a mantra, and like I would just say, today I am pregnant, and try and like remind myself of that, you know, and be okay with that, and just enjoy that, you know, and not let the worry and anxiety take over all the time. Because it's easy, like you said, you do feel like you're almost like help. And I think your brain is trying to help yourself. It's trying to protect you from what's happened in the past. And it's like, oh, well, if I'm not excited, then I won't be impacted. But that's just not true.
Right. And then I had recently a patient who was very, very anxious for the first couple of ultrasounds. And at one point she just I said it's okay. Like what you're going through is so valid. It's like you're not alone at all with what you're feeling. And I think that she felt alone. She didn't really realize like that it was very normal. And I think at that point with that validation, she just started crying when she got the acupuncture. And I said, and she's like, you know what? I haven't allowed myself to cry like this. And it's so healthy to cry. It's so good because your body automatically releases and you feel less stressed and your body doesn't hold on to this tension. It's actually really good to have those moments of breakdown.
Yeah. How amazing for her to have, a practitioner like you to help with that, because I found so many women, they just don't have that support. And it's important to kind of realize what's there and to feel the feelings and to be able to express them.
Yeah, for sure, without a doubt. And I remember you blogged on my website, and I loved it because you were talking about different ways to cope. And you talked about a lot of different important topics. One of them was that men and women don't grieve the same.
Yep. Yeah.
And I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah. And I think, the whole, like, even just including your partner and spouse, like in the infertility thing, it's kind of a weird thing where it's like, it's only the women that are talked about. And like, I don't know, but the spouse is like such a big part of it in so many ways and for so many reasons. But yeah, like the grieving part specifically is one where that, like, me and my husband, like, we experienced it differently, but it was a loss for him too.
Yeah.
And just because he was experiencing it differently didn't mean he wasn't experiencing it. It doesn't mean it wasn't hard for him, and trying to figure out. And that's where I go back to therapy, but I do think that's important for people to like try and, if you can incorporate that, it is really helpful. But like, we went together to like, that was something that I really had to learn of like, oh, like he's showing me how he cares, but it's not how I was expecting it, And I think it was vice versa, right? Like maybe he wanted me to do something to show I cared, but I wasn't doing it the right way. So like actually having that conversation of like, what do I need in the moment? Do I need my space, or do I need you to come in and give me a hug? Because it's different for each person. And so being able to like talk about that, and for us, like that was the first time we'd really grieved anything together. So I think, that's true for a lot of couples. When you go through grief together, you have to like learn what that looks like for each person and what you can do to support them. So
such a good point. I think that's such an important thing to keep in mind, because I think that we see the world through our own eyes, like how we feel, and we expect that if a person doesn't act the way we feel or would act, that they're not feeling the same way. But their way of grieving might be just kind of getting quiet or getting busy, or who knows? I mean, everybody has such a different, unique way of expressing themselves, and I think that can cause a lot of disconnect.
Yeah, I was like, why is he not crying? I was crying crying all day, I was crying all the time. Yeah. And he was never crying. But it like that didn't mean that he wasn't sad. I didn't mean, and also like you said, he was like, sometimes he would just busy himself with work. And like, I'm like, did this not matter to you? But it did, and we just had to have those conversations and talk about it.
And then I also love the fact that you were talking about how animals, your furry friends, can actually really soothe your emotions.
Yes. And one of my cats, so we have two cats. One we'd already had, but the second one I got after I used, and I think this is a totally valid reason to get an additional pet. But like after the first miscarriage, like we need another cat. And my husband's like, okay. And like to this day though, she's like, both of them have helped me through like my darkest times. And, but yeah, that one, she was, hey, I just went through this. I need another pet. And, but yeah, they're great. And we also have chickens, which they're not like cuddly, but they kind of are. Like they do provide that, I guess, entertainment. So I'm a big proponent of using animals when you're going through, hard times. So.
Yeah, animals are amazingly healing. They really are.
No, and I mean, I don't know the research to cite it all, but there's a lot of research that just the act of like petting a cat or a dog it releases these hormones that's going to help you feel better. So, yeah.
Yeah, without a doubt. And then I know that you did what something that actually intrigues me is mind abdominal massage. I don't have anybody here that does it. I would have them at my office if that was the case because
Oh.
it just seems so amazing. So what was your experience with that?
I liked that one. So, I always say there's so many different things you can do out there.
Yeah.
And part of it to me is just finding a person that you can connect with. Like, don't do something because it worked for someone else or you think you should, but like, try out different things. I mean, I do look at the research, but then I also like want to meet the practitioner in person. Do I connect with them? Do I feel like when I go, does it feel good? Like it's kind of almost more a feeling. And the person I worked with the abdominal massage, I felt like she was very in tune with my body. She also did craniosacral work. So she would do kind of both at the same time. And to me, it really felt like it was helping. And, again, like it's this very kind of subjective thing. But I did like my abdominal massage and she does kind of like physically manipulate the uterus and mine was tilted a little bit. So she like helped with that. Now, ultimately, was that something that helped or not? I mean, it's just so hard to ever know what helps, what doesn't. But I don't like regret my time going in because when I was there, I always felt, cared for and supported and all of that, which I think sometimes it's like, it doesn't matter so much the modality. It's just like that you are feeling cared for and supported. So
yeah, totally. I'll tell you, I mean, the reason why I'm drawn to that, to abdominal massages, a lot of times we carry so much emotion, like, well, first of all, in our bodies, just period, but also in our abdomen. I mean, I feel like it releases a lot of emotion, especially when it comes to fertility and going through the carrying. And so when you're actually having somebody help you release in that area physically, it really helps you with your emotions. It's very difficult to deal with emotions from the mind, because you're already feeling that energy of emotion, so you're in it. But when you're dealing with it through the body, it's a lot more digestible, I feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I don't know if I've even talked about this anywhere, but right before, actually, I think it's before the IVF round, but sometime before my most recent pregnancy, I went to Guatemala for a girls' trip. And it was kind of at this yoga healing center. And we had a sound bath and like a fire ceremony and a few different things like that I think really kind of helped me process and get through some emotions. And even was it a journaling exercise where she kind of like had us journal through like some different chakra stuff and like open up some blocked chakras. And I definitely left feeling like I had kind of like done some releasing and opening up of things. And, I think especially after going through something like recurrent loss, anything to kind of help, like you said, kind of get through and process some of those emotions, I do think they kind of get stuck and can continue to like manifest if you don't address them and you just let them like fester.
They do. I mean, we definitely store it in our bodies. It's crazy. And I watched a video recently on YouTube, and it was this woman, it was a psychologist. I think it was Therapy in a Nutshell. It would just kind of happen to randomly find this one video. And it was talking about processing trauma. And it was actually heartbreaking to watch because they showed an example of a polar bear that was captured and like right afterwards started shaking because he was traumatized. So when you see him shaking, it's heartbreaking to watch. And his whole body was like just shaking. But what she was saying is that animals will shake for a while to process that trauma, and then they'll get back up as if nothing ever happened. They just release it from their body right away. And so she said we could literally just shake for like 2 to 4 minutes at a time or more, just shake our whole bodies to help. Or especially, it's more helpful, I think, if it's triggered and you're actually, it's coming up and awakening, or like coming up. Yeah, you're really feeling it. I thought that was just so fascinating.
That is, I think we've kind of lost some of those natural processes that I think a lot of the animal world still, they just naturally do that. So.
Yeah, and what we're taught a lot of times is if you're feeling any kind of emotion or you're upset, just kind of grin, bear it, hold it in. And so what you do is you actually stiffen up. And when you stiffen up, you're really you're keeping it in your body. You're keeping it in place.
We're working through that a lot in my household because I have a toddler now, and they have all of the emotions, but we're really focused on that of like, it's okay to feel the emotion. It's okay. And it's like, it's so fascinating and sometimes difficult, but to watch him like physically experience these emotions, but to not be like, hey, you're fine, not to like ignore that and like be like, oh, you're fine. Be like, no, like you're feeling really mad. Like, how are you going to deal with that? And but in watching that, I'm like, how many of the emotions did I have growing up that I didn't really learn how to? So I almost feel like through watching him learn how to process emotions, I'm like learning in a better way how to process my emotions too. It's pretty interesting.
Oh, kids are your biggest gurus.
Yeah.
There's no other guru like your child. They'll teach you everything about your own psyche.
Yes.
Without a doubt. And so talk about meditation too, because I love meditation. So have you meditated throughout all the process, like the whole journey?
Yeah. So right before we started trying, my husband and I both went through TM, Transcendental Meditation training. So we did that. And so like the year leading up to like our fertility journey, like we did that. We even did like because, we didn't have kids, we had more free time and all that. So we would do 2 20-minute meditations a day. I don't stick to that. Like kind of that first year I was really good about it. And now like I still meditate on a regular basis. I'm not so it has to look exactly like this, but yeah, I've regularly meditated, since then. So for the past 5 or 6 years, and it definitely, there's times when you kind of lose it. I think also like when you're in the depths of grief, like it's tempting to kind of not do it and not sit there, but I do try and always. And before I did TM, I even started this thing. So when I got into it of like, okay, you have to like, let me just say I have to meditate every day, but I wouldn't like put a number on it. I was like, okay, just set the timer. I started with 2 or 3 minutes before I did the whole training thing. And so when I do get off track, that's what I do. I was like, okay, like I'm going to wake up and meditate this morning. And as long as I do a few minutes, then like, I'm kind of getting back in that habit. But yeah, so I kind of just have my own version of meditating now, which is I set the timer for 20 minutes, but depending on the morning and how much time I have, I don't always do the full 20 minutes, but I try. And for me, I feel like as long as I can get 5 to 10 minutes, it's like enough that I feel a little more like calm and grounded. But having to figure that out with a, new baby at home, that was like the first few months with him, I was not doing that. And then I really had to like, no, this is something I have to do and I need. And so I've been a lot better at doing it every day because I've realized how much I really needed it in the postpartum period.
Oh, big time. That's when I got really like solid on my meditation practice was when I first had my baby. I was like, I need this because I need to supply energy. You really need to supply energy. And if you cannot do that running on empty and there's no other energy, it doesn't matter. You don't sleep, forget the sleep, but there's no other source of like real solid energy like the one you get from meditation. And you get much more in tune with your intuition, which is so important.
Yeah. And the other thing I've been, and this is kind of more recently, but like I've sometimes gotten in the habit of like and I love podcasts. We're talking on a podcast, but like sometimes like constantly, like if I go on a walk, like always having something in my ear. And so then I try and scale back of like, okay, yes, it's good to like listen to things and learn and like have like an audiobook or something like that. But then also just trying to have like, okay, I'm going to go for a walk today and I'm going to walk in silence. And, that's not in place my meditation, but it is like just a way to like, be outside and in nature and kind of like ground myself and not constantly having something in my ear. Cause I think sometimes that's like this distraction that.
Oh yeah. Noise pollution is a thing.
Yeah.
It really is. And you need that space. And it really comes down to that space. And I feel like we just don't give ourselves enough time to process emotions, or to digest emotions or digest even information in our brains. And I think when you have that space, you can digest it. You need to digest thoughts and feelings. It's something that you need to digest as well. It's not just food.
Yeah. And you have to do you have to have quiet moments. And today with so much and like your phone and everything else that's going on, it's like, it's easy to, you can avoid that if you want, but it's not going to be good in the long run.
No, without a doubt. So I also wanted to talk about the food preps, your prep dish.
Yeah.
It's very cool. So talk about that.
Yeah. So I mentioned that I'm kind of like a long-term entrepreneur, and actually I started out as a personal chef. So I went to culinary school and have a master's in nutrition.
Your
And
husband's so lucky.
he knows it too. But yeah, so I started out cooking for people as a personal chef, and no longer do that. But I did, I had that business for about 10 years. And as I was doing that, I was cooking for people one-on-one, but I was like, gosh, how can I get this to more people? And like, I kind of had created this process of like, okay, if I'm going to go in and cook for people, how do I do it like really efficiently and, quickly and all of that, so I can service more people. And I started writing down my process and my recipes. And I was like, okay, why don't I figure out, I met with a designer, I put it into a PDF and created this thing called Prep Dish. And this was 8 years ago now. And, it's evolved over the years, but it's stayed the same in that it's a grocery list. So it's this organized grocery list. You can get online and order the groceries. And then prep day is my big key. And that is like, here's these instructions to spend an hour or two getting all of your meals ready for the week. So doing the chopping, the mixing of marinades, just any of the like little tasks you need to do. And then that way, the third piece is the dish day. And that's like, okay, at dinner time, all you have to do is like throw it in the oven for 20 minutes because you did all the heavy lifting on, Monday evening or Saturday morning. And the beauty there is like, there's a lot of efficiency to batching and like only doing all the prep at once, right? You're only pulling the cutting board out once, you're only chopping once, because that's what I did for my personal chef. I visited them once a week. So, so that's been going on for several years, and I've been gluten-free. When I started, it was basically about the time I went gluten-free, because I was kind of a long story there, but like found out like I'm intolerant to gluten and probably have been my whole life. So all of the plans are gluten-free. We have a paleo option. We have a keto option. Although we did just also introduce this year, it's called super fast. And that actually isn't really specific to any diet, but it's focused on 1 hour of prep, 5 meals. So it's like, okay, if you really are short on time, like how do you spend 1 hour of prep and then your like meals are ready to go for the week? And that's been really popular. And I will say that's like basically the only one we use at our house right now. Cause
right. Of course, you have your hands full.
So time is like, always like the thing. So anyway, but yeah, those, and it's been fun now to like come full circle. And now I always use the meal plans, but now it's like, I rely very heavily on them. I order the groceries every week. We do the prep, we have the meals, and like, we wouldn't survive without Prep Dish. So it's kind of cool to be able to like have that come full circle and now be, more of a customer than I was when I first started it. So,
that's what I need in my life right now. Honestly, it's all a strategy. Whenever you learn about whatever it is, you find out that the people that are pros, they have a very easy strategy, or a simplified. And I think that we complicate it in our minds before actually learning that simplicity. But it's all a strategy. Even like finding time to meditate, it's a strategy. Like what you were saying about starting out with 2 minutes a day, that's what I tell all my patients to do. Just do 2 minutes a day, because then you're teaching yourself that it's a habit. But yeah, everything's a strategy. Like what you eat for dinner.
You don't have to think about it, right? So like the meditation, if it's 2 minutes in the morning and you like do it when you first wake up, you don't have to think about it. You don't have to like, so if you put it off, you're never going to do it. If you're like, oh, I'll do it sometime in the afternoon. No, just do it when you first wake up, and then you won't put it off. And like, same thing with meals. It's like, if someone sends it to you and you don't have to think about it, like right now, like I don't have time to think about, like, I don't know what's for dinner tonight, but I know it's for dinner tonight, right? Because it's printed up, it's on my fridge, and like it's already prepped and ready to go. So
yeah, awesome.
Like
that's great.
Little thinking is possible.
Exactly. And then it's realistic, and then it's something that you can really do and be healthy, right?
Yes, exactly. So, and we do have, and that's what I mean, I don't know, I would never say like, oh, this was the thing, but like we have some, a reset plan, because all the other ones are subscriptions and like every week it's new meals, but we have one that you can buy just one time and it's a reset plan. And I was using that when we did get pregnant. So it's like kind of like Whole30, where it's, just completely like no dairy, no grains, like just very clean eating. And so that was the one that we were using when we didn't get pregnant.
Listen, food is medicine.
Yes, I know.
It's powerful, really powerful. If done right, it could change your whole life.
Oh yeah. No, I'm a big, proponent.
Well, awesome. So how can people find you, and how can people find all the resources you offer?
Yeah. So, Miscarriage Hope Desk. So for that, there's the website, which has all of the research articles and stories of hope. But we also have an Instagram account, which is at Miscarriage Hope Desk, and a podcast as well, which is a mixture of experts and stories of hope. And then for Prep Dish, it's kind of same thing. The website's Prep Dish. There's a free trial on there, so if people want to try that out. And then the Instagram is at Prep Dish, all the things, Facebook, all of that. So those are kind of the two places. I'm trying to think if there's anything else to mention. Oh, so for Miscarriage Hope Desk, if someone is struggling, we have a moving forward program, and potentially another one that we're going to add in later this year. But if they would go and on the website, they can sign up for a lab checklist. So if someone is going through miscarriages, especially recurrent loss, I've put together a list of like, hey, here's some labs to take to your doctor to make sure you're not overlooking anything. So that's there as well.
Oh, that's great. Really good information. Well, thank you so much, Allison. This is such a great conversation. And thank you for sharing your story. I know that this is going to bring a lot of hope to so many people. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you for having me. It was so good. Like you said at the beginning, we've been connected, but it's fun to actually get to see you face to face and connect a little bit more. And I just love what you're doing. So thank you too.
So that concludes today's episode. You can find all of the links mentioned on the episode notes. If you're enjoying these episodes, please take a moment to share and leave a review. Reviews mean everything to podcasters, and I really enjoy hearing from my listeners. You can also find me on my website at www.thewholesomelotus.com or email me at info@thewholesomelotus.com. I love hearing from my listeners. If you're interested and want updates as well as a free ebook on my top 10 fertility boosting habits, you can visit my fertility page on www.thewholesomelotus.com. I thank you so much for listening in and hope that you have a beautiful day.